He takes the pass inside the 22-metre line, races to the edge of the 22, gets a big boot underneath that one, the old-fashioned up and under, or Garryowen, something we don't see very often, as he goes chasing up to gather that one, catches it.
I'm on my way to Limerick City to learn about Garryowen. It's a suburb that has gained international recognition in song and in sport. The word Garryowen comes from Garry, meaning garden, and Owen, meaning John. I'm meeting historian Sharon Slater in St. John's Parish to unravel the mystery of who Owen, or John, actually was.
Limerick is full of Johns. There's St. John's, King John's. So which John is it? Is it one of those guys?
That's the question. That's the debate. The name John is very interesting because there's different spellings of John too. And the spelling of John for Owen for this area would have been the spelling for St. John.
Of course, the question here is which St. John? Is it like John of the Cross, or would it have been St. John the Baptist?
Well, we know that there was a church of St. John here from at least 1190. It was named after St. John the Baptist.
So where exactly is the garden?
We are inside the walls of the old Limerick City,
Right.
Of the Irish town, and it was situated just outside the wall.
Those
so
walls
we would
there,
have to walk just this way.
The nearby Garryowen Road leads to the housing estate of the same name. It was built in the 1950s, but there are still shades of St. John's Garden to be seen.
That is a considerable green space.
The houses were built in the 1950s, but before that, everything outside of the wall of the old Irish town was green.
And was that used as commonage, or was it laid out as gardens for promenading and all the rest
It
of
had
it?
mixed purpose throughout the centuries,
Yeah.
but it was mostly used for wealthy people who were stuck in behind the walls, who wanted somewhere to come and get a bit of fresh air. I've got a map here. I can show you what it was like. We came along here, and Garryowen was just all green here.
And was that the Markets Field there on the...
That was the Markets Field. So the Markets Field was to the right and Garryowen to the left. So on the map you can see that there used to be a brewery near enough where the Markets Field is.
Yeah.
And the song Garryowen comes from that brewery. There was some young lads who were the sons of the brewery owner, and they used to come down from Garryowen into the city, cause a lot of ruckus around the place. And like most mischief makers, they had songs created about them. And the song Garryowen, that is famous now all over the world, was about these mischief makers from Garryowen.
The Garryowen song crossed the Atlantic Ocean to America, where it found new life as an anthem for the US cavalry. It was sung by General Custer's troops before the massacre at Washita River and the destruction of many other Native American villages. It was only in 1968 that the US cavalry finally apologized to the Native Americans. They vowed never again to sing Garryowen.
Well, I couldn't leave Garryowen or John's Garden without paying a courtesy call to the Markets Field. I'll tell you, as a League of Ireland fan, I've witnessed so many wonderful away days here. I'm talking back in the early 1970s when Cork Hibs came to play Limerick here, and you had Al Finucane and Amby Fogarty for Limerick and Maya Dennehy and Wiggy. It was just brilliant. It's always been a great venue, and over the years the Markets Field has hosted a whole variety of sports. There's been soccer, yes, there's been greyhound racing, Gaelic games were played there, so too was rugby. In fact, this is the home pitch of Garryowen Rugby Club. They've moved on since to the other side of town, and that's my next port of call.
Garryowen Rugby Football Club is now firmly ensconced in Dooradoyle. John Quilligan is president of Garryowen, and his family have had a long association with the club.
The club was formed in 1884, John, and 2 years later, 1886, the club started playing their games in the Markets Field, in the heart of Garryowen.
Yeah.
And they played there until 1958.
Mind you, Garryowen has since become immortalised by that technique, that kick.
I suppose the idea behind the Garryowen was that you kick the ball very high, not very long, and you give your teammates the chance to follow up and either get the ball back or force the other team to knock it on, and you got a scrum. I'll tell you a story now, because it was often wondered where the name came from. And there was a New Zealand historian, rugby historian called Wallace Rayburn, but he had it at the time that the Garryowen team was known as a team of big, tough forwards.
Mullickers.
And so that the club developed that ploy to make the best use of those forwards.
Yeah.
That's where the name was kind of said to come from at that time. We've been central, to the story of Irish rugby.
So 39 senior cups, you had Munster representatives, caps for Ireland and for the British Lions, and of course there was that Oscar nomination as well.
It was Mr. Harris.
Yeah, Richard Harris played for the club.
Richard Harris played for the club. He won a cup medal in 1952, actually in the team that was captained by my father, and that also included Gordon Wood, who we mentioned earlier on. So he was a good company. And
rugby in
he
many ways.
went on from strength to strength.
He did, and the rugby stood to him, didn't it?
He did, of course. Yeah, he did, of course, because he went on to, I believe he got an Oscar nomination for the film called The Sporting Life.
Current senior team scrum half Neil Horgan and out half Ben Healy have been demonstrating the Garryowen for me.
Would I be right in saying the Garryowen has kind of gone out of date in the last couple of generations?
I think everyone knows what a Garryowen is, but you can't be screaming Garryowen in the middle of a field because they'll start falling back into position then. So everyone kind of does the same concept of it, but might have a different name.
There's a few different techniques to put up a spiral bomb, which is basically like an old spiral, but it goes up and it comes down spinning. You wouldn't put up a spiral bomb if you wanted to win the ball back now, because you're giving yourself very little chance. But on a wet, greasy night now, if you ask most fullbacks if they wanted a spiral bomb, I don't think many of them would say yes.
We have our own kind of code name for it inside, but
And what's the code name?
oh, couldn't be giving away those kind of details.
So there you have it, the Garryowen. Not unlike the puck fada or the give it a lash of other codes, it's a brilliant technique for buying time when your team is under pressure. The difference, however, is that the Garryowen has gone international. It's into the vernacular. So the next time you hear a Kiwi commentator refer to a Garryowen, you know he's talking about John's garden inside in the heart of Limerick City.